link is about. Okay, so in this case, I can just say, this is the report of how people doze off in Dr. Tech's classes. And then you can specify whether you want to, when people click on this link, you have several options. Do you want the material linked by this hyperlink to replace the current window? In that case, you select none. Okay, when you click the link, it will just open, the page using the same window and the same tab in your browser. You can select new window, in which case it will open up a new window, which is nice because you can keep reading the current article if you want to. You can go back easily. Same frame, basically, it will still replace the current page, but if the current page is in a frame, it will maintain the same frame, which means you can still navigate within Moodle if Moodle is using frames. And same window means, it will just open it in the same window. Okay, so there are different options, and typically, I personally, a lot of times I pick new window, but some people do not really like that idea. Okay, and then you click OK, and that should have turned it into a hyperlink. What did I do wrong? RateMyProfessors.com. Okay, new window, just like that, and click OK. Okay, so you can see that with WYSIWYG, it turns blue with underline right away to indicate that this is a hyperlink now. Okay, so you can do all this fun stuff here. You can insert tables. Okay, if you want to use a table, you can insert tables. If you want to have emoticons, you can also insert these emoticons. You can play with all these features. But one of these buttons is particularly important if you want to learn how to write HTML documents by hand. In other words, if I give you nothing more than Notepad, how can you create your HTML documents? Okay, well, this little button here is useful. Toggle HTML source. When you click this, it all becomes gibberish. Well, but hold on a second here. That's not exactly gibberish. You can see that H1 as a tag is ended by the end tag of H1. Okay, the end of one tag is always beginning with a less than symbol, a slash, and then the same name as the beginning of this tag here, followed by the greater than symbol. Okay, yep.
I have used HTML a little bit before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to write the break tag with the little slash in it? I didn't use that. I just wrote it BR with the bracket.
Okay, so you're referring to the line break tag. If you do not have the end tag, it is actually considered sloppy code. Because if you just have BR and then the close bracket without a slash, a more stringent engine will actually be remembering that this tag has not ended yet.
Except I don't think the break line or the horizontal line tags have an end tag.
Does it?
The book says there's no end tag.
Okay.
For break tags, it's more professional to BR slash.
Yeah, you might fail some tests. If someone runs an acid test, on your web page, it will probably come up as a complaint. It's not disabling. In other words, the content of your text will still be rendered correctly, but you will not be able to pass the standard checks like HTML4 standard checks and whatnot. It may not pass that. Yep. So it's usually better to just conform to the stricter standard and use this slash to say that this is both the beginning and the end of this particular tag. Yep. Mm-hmm. But this is it. I mean, this is basically HTML, and you can see the text that I have is actually interleaved somewhere in here. In other words, the heading, this is a test, is enclosed by the H1 open tag and the H1 close tag, which basically means everything in between, should be rendered as header 1. You can see this is how we put an image here. everything included. Okay, this is a really long tag here. It is an image tag. We specify the border by using the, is it called an attribute of a tag? So the attribute here is called a border. The alignment is baseline. Vertical spacing is 0. Horizontal spacing is 0. The source, which is telling me where can I find the image, is http://images.huffingtonpost.com/gen . The alt text, which is basically for anyone who is blind using a screen reader, this image will be replaced by a photograph of a student dozing off in a class. Okay. The title is a photograph of a student dozing in the class, which is also helpful for people who are blind because the screen reader can also read the title. Okay, then we have BR. BR is a line break, which means I want to open up another line. And then we have the text that I just entered. Text class is very boring. I'm just about to fall asleep. Blah 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 blah. And these two line breaks basically means that I'm breaking that one line and also an empty line after that. The hyperlink is rendered by the A tag or anchor tag. The A tag, basically only has a name of a single letter, and this is how you specify where it is linked to. You specify the title of the link like this. Okay, and then the rest really is just the text of whatever I typed a little bit earlier. So, are there any questions about not about specific tags that I introduced here, but about the mechanism to write an HTML document using a more or less WYSIWYG manner so that you can do things quickly? But then you can turn on the HTML source code to look at the exact tags that are created by the WYSIWYG interface. So I personally like this interface because it's a quick and easy way to learn how to create HTML documents, because guess what? If you copy and paste this into a notepad and from notepad into an HTML document, you can save that document as HTML. Well, after you insert just a little bit of additional stuff, you can upload it to a website, someone who would host your web pages, and then it becomes a regular HTML page. Okay, are there any questions about what I was trying to illustrate? No questions? Is anyone interested in creating your web pages and posting it on a website so that your friends and family and whatnot can access it? Okay. It can be learned on your own. Okay, you can see that it's really not that complicated. But if you learn it on your own, you won't be getting units and you won't be getting a certificate. Okay, so if you want to get the units and also get a certificate in web authoring or something along that line, you can take our CISW classes. Okay, some of those classes are fairly elementary, like the CISW 300 classes are pretty easy, but it is a prerequisite to the more complicated ones. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at those classes that we have here. I am really not trying to advertise our classes so that we can have more people enrolled in the classes, because as it is right now, our classes are always full. We cannot accommodate any more students. But I do want to give you the exposure so anyone who's interested can sign up for a class like that before it gets filled up. That's the whole idea. The Photoshop class is great. My wife took that class, and you learn interesting skill set. In the Photoshop class, which is Photoshop would belong to like chapter 3. The discussion of application software, is in chapter 3. In Photoshop, what can you do in Photoshop? Lots of stuff. Okay, you can edit pictures. If there's someone in the picture that you do not like, you can edit that person out of the picture. Okay. If there are certain things like some people. Okay, when you use a flash, especially a kind of like a wimpy flash, and the people is not exactly lined up in the same plane. Okay, perpendicular to the camera. Sometimes people to the back will be kind of like dark, and people to the front are really overexposed. You can fix that using Photoshop. So in Photoshop, what you can do is to select the people who are too dark. You select that portion, and then you can just brighten, change the contrast, and change the brightness of that group of people without changing the rest of the picture. So you can adjust based on which role this person is in, and then in the end the picture will have everyone illuminated at about the same level. Okay, so you can do a lot of fun stuff with Photoshop. Yep.
Yeah, my brother's actually in the simple class of Photoshop.
Okay.
He had to do a project once, and he did he took video of him skateboarding, doing a trick, and then he went through each frame and erased himself.
Oh, that's a lot of work, because you have to do it to every single frame. Wow, that's pretty dedicated. That's more than what I would want to do for my homework assignments. Okay, come on. Okay, bring it up. Okay, so we have these web classes. I just want to point out some of the classes that are related to what we just talked about. And let's see, these are all certificates. I'm looking for course description. Am I looking at the wrong thing? Right here. Okay, so here's a description of the web publishing class, which is CISW 300. It does have this class. Well, it doesn't even have this class listed as an advisory, so you guys are fine. There's no prerequisite to this class. This course is an introduction to publishing on the World Wide Web. Topics include creating web pages with the hypertext markup language, HTML, which is exactly what I just did, except I really did not go into the tags too much. I just talk about the mechanism. Do this in WYSIWYG, turn it into HTML code so you can actually see what is generated from that. Personally, I think doing that is a whole lot better than reading a textbook. Because if I read a textbook, I will fall asleep in like 10 minutes. A book that's on HTML, TCP/IP is even worse. Organizing a series of pages into a website and uploading web pages to a server. This course makes extensive use of the computer tools necessary. Well, let me just bump up the size of this page here so we can see a little bit better. There we go, much better. Organizing a series of pages into a website and uploading web pages to a server. This course makes extensive use of the computer tool necessary to insert HTML tags, create images, and view web documents. So they will basically teach you how to create HTML documents using Notepad, using just a plain text editor. It also prepares apprentice web designers and publishers to identify the information dissemination needs of a client, design an appropriate web solution, and implement it. So this part is more of a business end of web authoring, which is just as important if you want to become a consultant or an independent author to help out other people to create their websites. So for people in this class, I think some people in this class can benefit from CISW 300. The pace of this class, CISW 300, is fairly slow. Okay, it's not a really quick-moving class. By comparison, our VB classes are very quick, quick-paced classes. This one is kind of slow, and as long as you read the textbook, follow the instructions of the instructor and stuff like that, and do your exercises, I think most people should be fine with this class. But at the end of this class, all a student can do is to create static web pages. In other words, it's a web page, it is up there, it does not change by itself, it cannot take information, it does not process anything. Okay? Which is good for certain purposes, but it is quite limiting in terms of what it can do. So if you want anything that is interactive, in other words, I want to create a website so that people can sign in, and they can do this, they can query a database, and depending on what they're looking for, I can return with images, descriptions and whatnot.